Can you guess who said this about the Jews? And I quote, "Against the determination of the American people to stay out of war, they have marshaled the power of their propaganda, their money, their patronage, for reasons which are not American. They wish to involve us in the war." Was it Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, maybe Joe Rogan? Well, you'll be surprised. Hi, I'm Danny Seaman, and you're watching Straight Up on JNS TV, coming to you from Jerusalem, Israel. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Yes, I've quoted that before from Kohelet, and no truer words have ever been spoken. The chilling truth we are witnessing now is that the hatred we thought buried beneath the rubble of history has once again found a way of resurrecting itself. The resurgence of the age-old anti-Jewish sentiment on the streets, in institutions, and now online that echoes with disturbing familiarity the dark undercurrents that swept through Europe before the Second World War. The world promised us never again, but the warning signs look uncannily familiar. When synagogues require fortresses, Jewish students are ostracized for their identity, and ancient conspiracy theories are repackaged for viral clicks, it becomes harder to deny the fact that we've been here before. The past does not repeat itself in identical form, but its rhythms linger like a haunting melody. That, by the way, is what AI told me when I put this to its attention. The same patterns of scapegoating, the same conspiratorial whispers, the same mob mentality, drunk on hatred, frenzied into a tide of violence. These are not relics of history. These are present tense. These are what is happening now. Back in the 1930s, American exchange students went to Germany and returned, unsurprisingly, with glowing reviews of the Nazi Party. As the war in Europe spread, American isolationists warned against being drawn into the war they felt was not their own. And just like today, the words I quoted before were actually spoken by leading influencers of the time. This then was no other than Charles Lindbergh, who denounced Jewish people for pushing the U.S. towards what he called an unnecessary war. I quote, "Their greatest danger, the Jews, the greatest danger to the United States," said Lindbergh in 1939, "lies in their large ownership and influence in your motion pictures, our press, our radio, and our government." It sounds like things that are being said today. The ancient hatred returns, and with it the scapegoating once again of Jews, and in its most refined form of hate, the blood libel. Now, of course, with new design and purpose. The main purveyors of this are our very own prestigious media outlets. Just recently, these outlets have been echoing a despicable headline from an Israeli paper, well known for its sympathy for terrorists. And they're accusing Israeli soldiers of deliberately shooting and targeting civilians, having been given orders to do so, according to them, by the Israeli military. None of this is verified in the item itself, but it makes no difference to the media. They have their headline. That's all they care about. They have smeared Israel, and that's what they need against Israel. They are now reverberating this libel. Since they can no longer use the accusation of using Christian children's blood, they sanctimoniously hide behind the genocide blood libel to justify their conduct. And when they don't have that, they make up stories, just like The Guardian did back in 2006. Their headline that you see here, "Gazan doctors say patients suffering mystery injuries after Israeli attacks." There's nothing in the item itself except hearsay and libel. For example, they speak of dime weapons in that item that violates international law. To the journalist's credit, he goes then to an expert who tells him that these kind of weapons, these dime weapons, don't even exist. You would think that that would shelve the item at that point, but no. It's still there, hanging. The libel is stamped. The libel against the Jewish state of Israel is right there. Even in recent years, when Israeli soldiers are partaking in the most mundane of modern activities, posting on social media, for example, it suddenly becomes a topic of insinuation and innuendo. Other female soldiers around the world do it, as you see in this image. But when Israeli soldiers, like Natalia Fadeyev here, do it, suddenly the Rolling Stone magazine accuses Israel of thirst traps, whatever the hell that means. I follow her because Natalia projects the strong-spirited, determined, unapologetic Israel that we are. and that the world apparently has a problem with. So when world media is spreading such content with the sole purpose of dehumanizing Israelis, it should come as no surprise that you have at a music festival an idiot yelling, "Death, death to the IDF," and that the brainwashed masses are barking along in Pavlovian unison. Blinded to dozens of real atrocities around the world perpetrated by Muslims, your youth chant, "From one place to the other," or "globalize the into whatever." All this wearing the headbands of murderous terrorists and waving the flag of Islamic colonialism. Islam despises many things in the West. Our women, gays, pork, alcohol, things they call haram. And yet, these are the very ones who are most actively participating in the theatrical Nazi-like rallies and supporting them. Effeminate men, the gender dysphoric kooks, rapper pigs, and the Irish. The enemies of Israel are over 1 billion strong, with endless resources, financial and military. Yes, they have their moments like 9/11 or October 7th. But over the years, in Israel, we have mopped the floor with them every time they've tried to genocide us. Come to think of it, the only win Muslims have had recently is when an Algerian boxer said he was female and beat the crap out of some women during the Olympics. I started my opening today talking about, once again, about Kohelet and what he says about there's nothing new under the sun. But that said, there are new things happening. First off, we have today what we didn't have in the 1930s, and for 2,000 years, we have the State of Israel. And its amazing abilities have come into play in the past few months. And I would precisely want to talk about that with my guest today. My guest today is Eran Shayshon, who is the founder of Atchalta. Atchalta is a nonpartisan Zionist organization that combines thought with action. It was established with the goal of strengthening national resilience and security, as well as social cohesion in Israel and the Jewish world. So I thought it'd be very important in light of the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu, one of the many visits of recent months in the United States, to talk about what is happening behind the scenes and what we can read into all that is developing on all the changes occurring right now in the Middle East. Eran, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
As I mentioned, there are new things happening here. What do you see that is different, and where can you give us some insights onto, in light of the Prime Minister's visit, how this reflects on everything that has been happening in the last few months?
So I think that what we see in Washington is the celebration of two leaders that have changed the world. We see tectonic shifts in the Middle East. Nothing is going to stay the same. And maybe we'll start with the old Middle East and to understand the extent of the change that we're talking about. Before the war with Iran, and to some extent before the October 7th, Israel had an entrenched existential threat from Iran, who built a ring of fire around Israel. The idea was that the Iranians deployed their proxies in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in the Palestinian territories, in a way that will enable them to create this kind of, as I said, ring of fire that will allow them to conduct this never-ending war of attrition that will eventually bring to the collapse of the state of Israel. The idea was that in the D-Day, we will see hundreds of, or maybe thousands of missiles shot at Israel every day for years until the state of Israel will collapse, will implode. That was the idea behind the Ring of Fire. And when I spoke with people from the security apparatus, at a certain point, I understood that many of them believe that this is actually a flawless strategy. You know, Gholam Ali Rashid, the commander of what is known as the Khatem al-Anbiya, this is the organ in the Iranian security apparatus to which the Revolutionary Guards and the army report to. And he quoted Soleimani a few days before he was eliminated by Israel, that we have established 6 armies outside our borders, and anyone who wants to attack Iran will have to defeat 6 countries, 6 armies. And that's what Israel did. Now, October 7th surprised the Iranians, and they decided not to fully join. And the reasons are a couple. First, Iran did not, at the time, completed what would make it a nuclear threshold state. So they decided to refrain from an all-out war. They wanted to reach that status, which they really got just before the war. and they wanted to complete the deployment of the ring of fire. So that was before October 7th. And I don't think there was actually an Israeli pre-planned strategy against this ring of fire. It was more the exploitation, the wise exploitations of opportunities. And before I'll talk about the extent of changes, I'll share with you that I recently spoke with an American friend who told me, for an Israeli, you got pretty decent English, but you have this notable accent. And I said, I don't agree. I don't have it. It just sounds that way. And I think that this argument is much more convincing than the Iranian argument that they actually won the war. I think that what we see here is a very decisive victory in actually several fronts. The Middle East today is different. Last week we spoke. You interviewed me in
Right.
Hebrew
on my radio show,
station.
right?
That's right. And I mentioned that there are actually two dimensions in which one should evaluate the success of a war. One is the immediate military dimension, and the other one is for the long term. Victory at war depends far more on the trends that emerge afterwards than on the immediate battlefield outcomes. So when we look at the end of the war, clearly, I think that the symbolism in the final act of the war, where Iran shuts at Qatar, the two sponsors of Hamas, is a symbolic indication to the extent of success of Israel. Israel literally conquered the airspace in Iran. The leadership of the army, of the Iranian army, and the Revolutionary Guards were decapitated. Sorry for, I do have an audible accent. The ballistic missile project was cut in half. The nuclear project was badly hurt, even if the Iranians have kept 400 kilograms of uranium. And so this is for the short term. For the long term, I think that several things have happened that at this current point of time look very promising in the sense of the extent of the trends that they are likely to yield. So Israel proven itself as an asset to the US in several dimensions. First of all, on the geopolitical level, I think that the defeat had a global implication for the anti-American global axis. It's a blow to Russia and China. I call it the intersectionality of the international arena. Namely, we have different countries that have very little common denominator, but they are all trying to challenge the U.S. hegemony in the world. And we saw that the countries of BRICS and China and Russia are trying to do this. Iran was part of this strata.
Right, and it's amazing how they stood back. They were so shocked themselves that they realized that maybe they shouldn't get involved.
Absolutely. And I think that was also a proof of concept of the superiority of American technology here that was demonstrated. But it was also a proof of concept for the Israeli technology. Israel proved itself as a useful ally to the US, maybe not equal to the US, but Israel certainly is a technological superpower that you want on your side. The technological adjustment of the F-35,
right,
the unbelievable upgrade of the F-15s, the Iron Dome, the other interceptors. So during the Trump visit to Saudi Arabia and to Qatar, one of the main issues that were discussed is how to turn the Middle East into an AI hub. And of course, this is very much connected to the balance of power, the global balance of power. Right. And Israel was not part of this celebration. But now we can see that following the war, maybe because of the success of the war, Israel is perceived more than ever than a technological superpower that one should include it as part of the allyship with the US.
I think it's important to stress here that there is information gradually coming out. I spoke to people from Mossad, from the Israeli Air Force. There's a lot of things being supposedly leaked in the media. First off, people shouldn't believe everything they see in the media. But we do see that slowly things are coming out. But what we know from historically is that most of the stuff, the important stuff, are kept secret. So there's a lot that is happening that they're not going to be talking about because there's no reason to. But those who do understand, like the Russians, like the Chinese, certainly the Iranians today who thought they had everything in their back pocket, I think they realized that there were things, capabilities that Israel has that they still can't understand. And the United States, since we share everything, we are in effect the R&D for the United States. People don't understand that we do a lot of the research and development. Everything we develop here, we share with the Americans, and we provide them with that ability. We know it comes back to us eventually, but the United States appreciates that. No, nobody's a friend of anybody because they like them. It's interests. And in this case, Israel, like you said, does totally serve the American interests.
I absolutely agree. I remember when I was a kid in Jerusalem, there were T-shirts that were sold in Jerusalem that said there was an image of an F-15, and the slogan was "Israel, America, don't worry, Israel is behind you."
I remember.
That was a joke, but there's a lot into it now. I think that Israel really shocked the world, and maybe shocked itself as well. If I go back, so it is true when we talk about technology and AI. But it also, and I go back to the geopolitical issues about how the extent that the Middle East has changed. I think that, one of the most famous words in Hebrew following the Yom Kippur War was the conceptia, which basically talks about the conceptual framework that Israeli leaders were captive in, which prevented them understand the surprise that Egypt and Syria were preparing for us. Let's talk about the conception of the Iranian army. The Iranian army was not supposed to reach a point where it actually fights, right? So this is why Iran, most of its resources were dedicated in building its proxies. So in the new Middle East, it is most likely that Iranian will strive first and foremost to build its army, and that has to come on the expense of the proxies. This is a different world we're entering. Hezbollah was built for 40 years for that exact moment where it remained silent. And add to that the deterrence, the regional deterrence that Israel achieved, activating the regional cooperation, the allyship with America that was demonstrated to the whole world. So I think we're talking about a much more powerful image of Israel. And it's not just an image, it's really the capabilities.
And I think people have to understand that we had amazing victories in the past. Everybody remembers the 6-Day War. Here, Trump was talking about the 12-Day War. But Israel did not know, and I don't think it was capable of cashing in on its abilities to position itself as a regional power. And now that's one of the things that is different. That's one of the changes that has occurred.
I completely agree, but in order to tap on the potential, there are more that needs to be done. I think, I'm a member of the Israeli Coalition for Regional Security. Yesterday in the Knesset, the lobby that focus on regional cooperation in partnership with the Israeli Coalition for Regional Security invited Abdulaziz Al-Khamis, which is a Saudi senior journalist and Middle East researcher, as well as Shadi Martini, who was the general manager of a hospital in Aleppo. And they both spoke, and I quote, once in a century opportunity. And I think that Israel should use the momentum and present a vision for a new Middle East that unites the pro-Western Muslim countries who perceive Iran as an enemy, of course, with a very active partnership with the US. And I think that this is an unparalleled opportunity for, to tap on those amazing opportunities, not just to win in the military battle, but to make sure that we also picking the fruits of this victory, the political fruits. And that will be a refreshing change compared to the past. And in our last conversation, I mentioned the First Lebanon War, where Israel won militarily on the battlefield, but lost the political battlefield. And I hope that now it'll be different.
So that's probably why it was important for Netanyahu to rush over as quickly, because these things can change very rapidly. Right now, the Middle East, the Iranians especially, certainly the Chinese and the Russians are still in shock. Russia's involved in what is happening in the Ukraine. They're in shock. They're trying to understand what happened. Here is the appropriate time to create facts on the ground. And I believe that's what Netanyahu is doing together with Trump. Trump, you can see, with his trying to pull the Russians into some kind of cooperation with the United States. He's trying to shift things as well in order to create these changes for the Middle East.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that this coalition, this anti-American coalition on the international arena, has very little in common with one another, other than challenging America. And when America succeeded, I think this is that was demonstrated in Iran. That was an Israeli success with the U.S. Then I think that maybe they will seek the proximity of the U.S. You don't want very quickly to try to undermine the victorious. You want to be on the winning side.
Right.
So I see a great opportunity here as well on the international arena, as well as surprising opportunities here in the region. I mean, who would ever imagine talking about a normalization with Syria, for example? And people talk now about the prospects of having normalization with Syria as a gate for normalization with Saudi Arabia. Which I think is very interesting. I think that even Jolani or Shara, following this war, sees Israel, first of all, as a liability because we attacked there, but also as a potential asset.
Right.
Israel has good connection with minorities in Syria, the Druze and the Kurds. Israel certainly sees in Jolani a potential asset, with all the cautious about his past. But there is, the prospects of ensuring the security of the border. If reports are true that he's willing to waive the demand for the Golan Heights, if that will eventually involve normalization with Saudi Arabia, if that will be a key in calming the tension with Turkey, then we have a lot to gain.
I want to go back to a moment you mentioned something, the AI and all that. One of the things that's been overlooked in the visit, it was mentioned that Netanyahu signed an agreement with the United States. I think that was perhaps the most important part of his whole visit there. Yes, it's absolutely from the perspective of Israel, the reaching some kind of solution to the hostages. Nobody's belittling that. But when you're looking at the bigger picture, the fact that we signed this agreement, and they were very quiet about it, I think there's more there and more than they want to draw attention to.
I don't know better than any other individual who reads the paper, but I know for sure that AI is the future in every aspect, including the geopolitical. And I think that the innovation of the Israeli society, as well as the innovation that comes out from the security apparatus, are being perceived, and rightfully so, as an unparalleled asset. Again, as I said beforehand, I think that the fact that Israel was not at the center of Trump's visit in Saudi Arabia, that was a shame. But I think that now, following the war with Iran, there are new opportunities to make sure that Israel is not only part of that, but also plays a leadership role in framing the Middle East as an AI hub. That would be an amazing world to live in.
If we look at it in historic terms, I think we're now entering the 21st century. Where they had back in the 1920s, they had the Sykes-Picot, and they had this whole building of the new Middle East then on issues that were from the 19th century. And now we're taking the end of the 20th century and moving into a new way of observing things and bringing in the new technologies, a new world that we have today. And here, the Arab world that is sort of behind on this are also looking to be part of where the world is going. We all talk about AI, but the AI is perhaps the front of a lot of differences occurring in the technological world. And if we can focus on that, we can now start moving in where you put behind us all the arguments, the territorial arguments, the political arguments of the past, and building something new. And that's where I think they're going with this.
It's very likely. I think that Jolani, for example, from Syria, is definitely not a Sykes-Picot guy. If it is true that he's willing to waive the Golan Heights, I think that there's more maybe business-oriented or realpolitik-oriented perspective that I think Trump's bring to the region. We saw that, by the way, in dynamics that are not related to Israel.
Right.
Other than the Iranians striving for hegemony, there were two different competing axes. The Islamist one, Sunni Islamist, headed by Turkey and Qatar, and then the pro-Western axis headed by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And we saw that in Trump's visit, those came together. So, for example, when Trump met Jolani, it was with Erdogan and MBS, which I think is very interesting. So I think that very much validates the trend that you are pointing at. And for Israel, these, of course, are good news. That means that ideology is put at the back rear, and now there are opportunities that we can tap on.
All this said, and looking to the future, we're still being held back a little, if we want to call it that, by the realities. And one of them is Hamas and the battle in Gaza Strip and the fact that we do have the hostages there. How do you think we can move forward with this? How do you think this can be concluded? And how long before it is concluded? I'm not looking for prophecies. I'm looking for a professional assessment of what we can look forward to.
Clearly the October 7th massacre was a huge blow to Israel and the Jewish people in every aspect. But if the results of a war initiated by Hamas include Israel's integration into the region, possibly with normalization of Saudi Arabia, if the results of a war initiated by Hamas include the inclusion of Israel in a new land trade from India to Europe, if the results of such a war are the formation of a US-backed regional axis against Iran, if the results of such a war are the ability to influence the terms for Gaza reconstruction by the Gulf states, being part of the hub for an AI investment, as you mentioned, and of course, the return of the hostages home, then it will be clear that Israel achieved a sweeping victory in a regional war launched against it on 7 fronts.
All right. So you believe that we are going to, in one way or another, be able to, I'd say, address or bring this to a conclusion in the next few months? Or, they're talking about relocation, et cetera. Can we see that happening as well?
I think that the ingredients to end the war exist. I think this is surely will be perceived, even in the eyes of the Palestinians, as a defeat for Hamas this way or another. And what Israel needs to be cautious about is, of course, not to allow the seed that will eventually enable Hamas to regroup following the ceasefire. But I think that in any way that the Islamism, the strategy of the Islamists have gone, years back, and I'm really hopeful.
You concluded our interview on Israel Radio on the Galei Israel when we spoke this week. You gave a picture why you were optimistic. If you could reiterate that on the fact that Israel, Iran is far away and is not a direct threat to Israel. If you could reiterate that point for our English language viewers.
Yes, I think that war are being measured not only by their immediate success but also on their long-term initiative, which are very difficult to predict always. But when I look at those certain trends that are happening now, I do remain hopeful. I think that in the future we are likely to be a much weaker strata of proxies, Iranian proxies, in the region. And I explained why I think that Hezbollah is not going to regroup to the extent that it used to be prior to the war, primarily because of Iranian priorities. We see that there's a lot of bad blood between the players in the Iranian crescent. Iran didn't join when Hezbollah was attacked. Hezbollah didn't join when Iran was attacked. That was the day for which Hezbollah was built on. I think that Hamas suffered an ideological and even theological defeat. At the end of the day, we were launched against a religious war, right? This is how they perceive it. And there's one victorious in this war. So that is also a theological defeat. We see how the Abraham Accords changes the Middle East. So almost in every aspect that I can think of, there are opportunities. But we need the political wisdom in order to tap those opportunities. In that same interview that we mentioned earlier, I said that if you had interviewed me a week following the first Lebanon war, we were talking about the great Israel victory. Israel defeated the Syrian army. I think that the Air Force, in terms of planes, it was 82 to 0, 82 planes that Israel was able to shut down Syrian airplanes with 0 Syrians with successes. The PLO was,
defeated and sent off.
Was defeated, but few months later, we saw that the Syrians had the political wisdom to turn the defeat into victory. Israel has built upon a political settlement that was dependent on one person. That is, what was the name? Bashir Jumayel?
Jumayel, right?
Bashir Jumayel. No, that was Bashir Jumayel.
And within a week within a week he was assassinated.
Within a week, and this is one, by the way, why I'm also concerned about Al-Jolani, because the temptation to kill a political figure that represents an idea is very big. We should definitely put all the eggs in one basket. But then again, when I look at the ingredients now, we have better cards.
So right now, the circumstances for Israel are better. We just have to know how to take full advantage of this. And I think that started with the visit of Netanyahu, and the relationship between the United States and Israel right now will be better not only for Israel, but for the international community.
Absolutely. I very much agree.
Well, I guess this is the best way to end our conversation here. Eran Shayshon, thank you for joining us and giving us your insights into what is happening here in the Middle East. And this opportunity to also thank all of you for tuning in and watching us here on Straight Up on JNS TV, coming to you from Jerusalem. Thank you all. Thank you, Eran.
Thank you. It was a privilege.